Rich Padover. I'm the summer interpreter or tour guide here at Lawrence Heritage. So again, welcome to all of you. We will get started this morning with a visit by, as you've seen in the advertising we've been doing, we have Mrs. Abigail Adams here with us this morning, okay? And she will be giving a presentation to you about her and her husband, the American Revolution, the colonial era. I'm sure you will all enjoy it, okay? And I believe it's supposed to be interactive, so do take part as much as you would like to, okay? So I will now introduce from the American Revolution, Mrs. Abigail Adams.
More intellect and ability to the position of First Lady than any other woman. Yet she lived in an era when women were not supposed to have or express their opinions about government or the exciting events of the times. Abigail Adams struggled her whole life with the limitations that society placed upon her dreams. Despite these hardships, she found a way to use her talents to serve her nation by assisting and advising her husband, President John Adams, and teaching and guiding her son, President John Quincy Adams. Throughout her 73-year life, this American heroine was an invaluable contributor to the founding and strengthening of the United States.
John Quincy! John, quick, just a moment, Nabby. My goodness, that girl. It's not easy taking care of a family while your husband is away. I know. No one is without difficulty, whether in high or low life. And everyone knows where their own shoe pinches. Then again, nothing in my life has been exactly easy. Oh, I don't mean to complain. I do feel I have lived a very blessed life. It all started here. Well, not far from here, in a small town called Weymouth in the Massachusetts colony. At the time, the colony was one of 13 under British rule. My mother was Elizabeth Quincy, and my father, William Smith. He was a Congregationalist minister, and always emphasized to me the importance of reason and morality. My grandfather was John Quincy. I think he's the reason I became interested in politics and government. You see, he sat on the Governor's Council and militia and was Speaker of the Massachusetts Assembly for nearly 40 years. Like many, we are influenced by the people and choices we make in our lifetime. Perhaps that was a sign of what was to come. My husband, John, did go on to great things. Oh, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So much happened before then. I was the second child in my family and had an older sister named Mary and two younger siblings, William and Elizabeth. William was allowed to go to school because he was a boy. Back then, girls weren't allowed to receive a formal education. Well, I didn't think that was fair. And I told my mother so. Mama, why can't girls go to school with boys?
You know a girl's place is at home. Besides, even if you could go, you really can't. You're much too sick all the time. Come, let's have
ha. Il, ha.
Well done, Abby. Tomorrow we will work on reading.
El,
Still wasting your time with those lessons?
It's going very well, Lily. Abigail is an intelligent little girl. I have no doubt she'll be one of the most well-bred women of our time.
Well, it doesn't really matter all that much. Women don't need much education. It's a woman's place to stay at home, to cook, care for the children.
women don't need much education? Their place is to stay at home, to cook, and take care of the children? Why would you say that? I don't see any good reason why girls can't go to school with boys. It's just not right. Thank goodness for my family's library. I'm resolved to study English and French every day. I will continue to educate myself and learn new ideas.
Abby, I almost forgot. It's time for you to take your tonic. It's in the pantry on the bottom shelf. Go get it.
Tonic was another name for medicine, and I didn't like taking it. So I took my time going to the pantry.
Don't you dare go into that pantry. Can't you see the floor has just been painted? I wish you would look where you were going sometimes.
Rover! Rover! Oh, Rover! Oh, no. I got paint in my new apron. Mama's going to be very angry with me. I know. I shall clean it up, and she'll never have any idea. So I took off my apron, and I got out my scissors, and cut off the spots of paint wherever they were. There. Now Mama will never have any idea.
Abby, my goodness, what has happened to your apron?
Nothing, it's just the same.
I know you didn't mean to be naughty, but it shall take us a long time to make enough cloth for a new one.
It made me appreciate and take much better care of my possessions. My father was a religious man and taught me from an early age to respect God and help others whenever I could. Sometimes I'd go with my mother to visit the poor and would bring food, medicine, and clothing to the area.
Come along, Abby. Don't stare. They are people just like you and I. They have just fallen on hard times. We ourselves have much to be thankful for.
Yes, Mama. I shall always try and help those less fortunate than me. I learned a lot from my parents. Like to speak my mind and stand up for myself. But I was closest to my grandmother, and I walked almost 8 miles every day to be with her. She always said, "Wild colts make the best horses." I frequently think she left a more durable impression upon my mind than those which I received from my own parents. I enjoyed her happy methods of mixing amusement and instruction together. I'll never forget the lessons my grandmother taught me. I was now becoming quite a young lady, and getting to be of the age where a young lady begins to think of finding a husband. One evening, Mr. Richard Cranch came over to our house. He was engaged to my sister Mary and brought with him a friend, John Adams, from a local farm nearby. John and I had met once before in the summer, but I don't think either one of us was too impressed with each other. However, this time seemed to be different.
Abigail, it's a pleasure to see you again. You're looking lovely.
Mr. Adams. John and I were distantly related. He seemed immediately smitten with me. For the first time, I could speak to a man on the same page as my equal. We began to talk about politics and all manner of topic. I couldn't help but wonder if he might be my and I wanted someone who was intellectually my equal and someone who would appreciate my accomplishments. He began to court me. At first, my mother didn't think he was good enough for me to marry. But she soon began to realize his fine qualities. And on October 25th, when I was 19 years old, we were married at my home. My father presided over the wedding. Afterwards, we moved to Braintree, Massachusetts. John had inherited a small house with a farm next door. The following year, on July 14th, our first child was born, Abigail Amelia, but we called her Nabby. The following year, on July 11th, our second child was born, John Quincy. It was my job to take care of the farm, the family, the finances. I must say I did a rather good job, too. Meanwhile, John's career was taking a dramatic turn for the better, and he began to ride the court circuit, which meant he traveled from one district to the other, working as a lawyer. He was gone quite often, working in Boston, so it only made sense that we move the family there, and that's what we did. On the 28th of December, our third child was born, Grace Susanna. I enjoyed the hustle of Boston. There were shops to visit and 4 newspapers to read. However, the British soldiers were on the lookout for trouble from the colonists. The Bostonians didn't like this very much.
Mama, what is that noise?
Back to bed with you, Nabby. It's okay. Oh, John, thank goodness you're home. What is that noise? It woke Nabby out of a sound sleep. It sounds
The
so...
British soldiers, the ones stationed here to support royal officials.
Yes.
Well, people of Massachusetts don't like the legislation that they're trying to pass, and we Americans are not buying those things taxed by the British. The people were furious and started surrounding these soldiers and started shouting curses, throwing clubs and rocks and ice at them. They fired into the crowd. 3 fell dead, 2 more are like to die. Many wounded. I have decided to defend the 8 British soldiers involved and their captain.
John,
They stand accused of murdering 5 men.
think of your reputation, John. Your career.
I feel the soldiers acted properly and were provoked into firing by the unruly mob. I think it is important to prove to the world that the colonists were not a rabble under mob rule bereft of correctional principles. I believe all men, even those redcoats, are entitled to due process of law.
All right, John. You have my loyalty as always. I know you'll do the right thing. And he was right. The men were acquitted or freed of the murder charges. Winning this case brought my husband a great deal of success, and he had one of the heaviest caseloads of any in Massachusetts. I felt a great sense of pride because he stood up for what he believed in. I would have done the same. He soon became a member of the House of Representatives. The following May, our 4th child, Charles, was born. But at the beginning of 1771, John fell ill due to political obligation and exhaustion. So I packed up our house and the children and everything, and we returned back to Braintree, Massachusetts, so he could rest and recover. 2 years later, our 5th child, Thomas Boylston, was born, and we returned back to Boston. Who is it? It's me, Madeline. Oh, please come in. Would you like some coffee, cake, or perhaps a dish of Liberty tea?
Of course you will serve a dish of that vile English tea. You are a woman who stands up for what she believes.
Thank you.
Think you of this group that call themselves Sons of Liberty
Yes.
and protesting the Tea Act? I can't believe they dressed up like Mohawk Indians and boarded those 3 ships. Do you know they destroyed 340 chests of tea
Yes,
with
I
at
did.
least 10,000 pounds,
Yes.
hurling it into Boston Harbor? What do you think of the destruction of the tea?
Well, the Tea Act, that was designed.
It was to benefit the failing East India Company and gave them exclusive rights to sell tea to the colonies. Do you know what the colonists are saying about this?
What?
It's another means of taxation without representation. Taxation without representation? Whatever does that mean?
Well, it's because of the Parliament in London that, passed laws under which they were taxed. See, John supports the idea, but, I see no way to avoid war, really. Can I get you more coffee or Liberty tea?
Well, I must be going. Thank you so much for your hospitality.
Of course, Anna. Bye-bye. Oh, John, you're just in time. Would you like some coffee or cake?
Abigail, I'm off to Philadelphia.
Philadelphia? But why?
I'm going to serve as one of our colony's delegates to the First Continental Congress. America is making its first legislative moves toward forming their own government, independent of Britain. Over meetings, we will decide the future of these 13 American colonies. I'll run as often as I can. Please, take care of the children, my dear.
And then he was gone. We wrote letters back and forth to one another, but the mail was so painfully slow, it took almost 2 weeks for him to receive one of my letters. My dearest friend, the great distance between us makes the time very long to me. I'm just as committed to our country's birth, and I know this loneliness is a necessary sacrifice. John wrote
We
me
are
a
busy
letter.
here in Philadelphia, trying to figure out what kind of a nation America will become. I am alongside the most eminent and famous of men, my cousin, Samuel Adams, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, Patrick Henry, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, and Thomas Paine. Yet, I sometimes find myself frustrated with how little we are getting done in Congress.
Shortly after that letter, on April 19th, 1775, the British soldiers faced a battle with the colonists at Concord and Lexington. The Revolutionary War had begun. General George Washington was put in command of the new Continental Army. Now, when I first met Mr. Washington, I was hesitant because he was a slaveholder. I didn't agree with that. Then I told John so. But after meeting Mr. Washington, I was struck by him. He had a wonderful balance of dignity and ease about him. John Quincy, get your coat. You're coming with me.
Where are we going, Mama?
To the top of Penn's Hill to see for ourselves what is going on. Charlestown is laid in ashes. The redcoats are assaulting Breed's Hill to remove the colonial militia. Flames and black smoke rising above the city. It's horrible.
Mama, I'm frightened.
Do not be scared, John Quincy. When the first shots were heard, we stood our ground, even with the threat of British soldiers nearby. Your father told us to flee into the woods as things get bad.
And are things bad?
Great necessities call out great virtues. Sunday, June 18th, 1775. Dearest friend, the day, perhaps the most decisive day has come on which the fate of America depends. My bursting heart must find vent at my pen. I had just heard that our dear friend, Dr. Ward, is no more. fighting for his country, saying better to die honorably in the field than to hang upon the gallows. Great is our loss. I had to do something, anything to help. I sheltered people fleeing from Boston and wounded soldiers making their way into the city. I fed everyone I could. I made soap, I spun cloth, I made ink from ashes and berries. I melted down pewter spoons and turned them into bullets for the soldiers. Money was tight, so I asked John to send 10,000 pins. Oh, they weren't for me to use, they were for me to sell. Shortly after that, a dysentery epidemic broke out from unclean food and water. Many people were struck ill. My children were struck ill. As the colonial fight for independence from the mother country ensued, I was appointed, along with Mercy Otis Warren and the governor's wife, Hannah Winthrop, to speak with Massachusetts ladies who still remained loyal to the British Crown and who were working against the fight for independence. John wrote me a letter about this.
You are now a politician, and now elected into an important office, that of judges of Tory ladies, which will give you, naturally, an influence with women.
I did speak with British sympathizers, or Tories as they were called. A people shall let his king fall, yet still remain a people. But if the king shall let his people slip from him, then he is no longer a king. And this is most certainly our case. Why not proclaim to the world in your own decisive terms your own independence? It made me feel good to speak my mind and stand up for what I believed in. I was happy. But I was not happy to hear that the fighting still continued. So many ships, like a forest. Then one day, what an amazing sight. 170 British ships leaving Boston Harbor. General George Washington had finally rid the British from our city. Meanwhile, John was at the Second Continental Congress, working on the Declaration of Independence, a statement that would proclaim why the colonies wanted to break free from England. I decided to write him my thoughts on this subject.
I long to hear that you have declared an independency, and by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it would be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion, and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. Also, I believe there should be no slavery in a free country.
In July of 1776, Declaration of Independence was read to cheering crowds. Let me hear the cheering crowds! But I heard nothing about ladies or slavery. It seemed that independence was only for men of wealth and means. After a very long time, John finally returned home, but not for long. He was off to Paris to work on peace with England, and brought with him our 10-year-old son, John Quincy. The winters were harsh and cold. Oh, the war made things scarce and expensive. The farm was losing money. I decided to ask John to send things that I could sell. Before I knew it, I was receiving tea and fabric and dishes, among many other things. I began to trade directly to the warehouses in Europe and earned enough money to support the farm and our family. After a year and a half, John finally returned home, but again, only for a brief time. Off to France again with John Quincy and our other son, Charles. The war finally ended when the British surrendered at Yorktown in 1781, when it took America another 2 years to finally be free of Great Britain. Now the 13 independent colonies will create their own country, the United States of America. Oh, what kind of government would we have? What kind of laws? 3 branches of government were created: judicial, executive, and legislative. Oh, it was terribly hard for Nabby and I to be away from John for so long, so we decided to pack our bags and set sail for Europe. I'm so much a coward upon the water. We arrived in France. It was filled with lavish dinner parties. I enjoyed speaking to the women of France because they were free to speak their mind. Next, we were off to England. John had been appointed Grand Ambassador to Great Britain. We even received a meeting with King George III. Oh, I spent hours getting ready. Only to meet with our sovereign for a brief time. I wasn't too impressed with him. Oh, and meanwhile, the London papers were so harsh on John that we decided to return home, but this time to a new home, one that we called Peacefield. John couldn't resist politics. He soon became a member of the U.S. Congress. And now we were having our first presidential election, 1789. George Washington received the most votes, and John came in second, which made him the vice president. So we moved to New York. John, what will they call George Washington?
I don't know. Maybe Mr. Washington? Or Mr. President? His Excellency.
Oh,
That should be honorable and grand. What about His Majesty the President?
Oh, all of that was much too fancy for my taste. I was very happy when the Senate decided on the President of the United States. The capital moved to Philadelphia, so we did as well, but I was very unhappy living here. Eventually, we moved back to Peacefield. We had another presidential election. George Washington won again, and John continued as vice president for the next 4 years. I was becoming more and more interested in politics, which was a good thing. John decided to run for the presidency in 1796 and won, just barely. I wasn't able to be there with him when he won. I was caring for his dying mother. He desperately wanted me to go and be there with him. He wrote me this letter. Dear Miss Adorable, I never wanted your advice and assistance more in my life. Well, that was all I needed to hear. When I arrived in Philadelphia, I sprang into action. Up at 5 a.m. writing letters, organizing the servants, breakfast at 9 a.m. with the family, from 11 to 2 visiting with guests, 3 o'clock lunch with the family, from 4 until 7 visiting the wives of government men until sundown. I planned grand holiday parties and lavish celebrations, but through it all I remained the president's most trusted advisor.
I can do nothing without you.
I became so involved that people started to refer to me as Mrs. President. We were on the heels of yet another presidential election. But at the age of 67, George Washington passed away. He was known as the father of our country. No man ever lived more deservedly beloved and respected. A new city Washington was to be built in his honor, and a new home for the president was to be built there. The home for the leader of the free and independent United States was built by slaves, immigrants. It wasn't even finished being built when we moved in, but our time was short. John lost the election to Thomas Jefferson. We returned back here to Peacefield to retire with our family. I think John's presidency will best be remembered for his attention to foreign policy and the rights that he gave the citizens. As for me, how will I be remembered? Well, I guess that's up to you. I hope you will think of me as someone who influenced American history with her ideas. Someone who believed in the power of education, the rights for women, and all citizens. Because I really do believe that we are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 15th annual old-fashioned 4th of July celebration at Lawrence Heritage State Park as we gather to celebrate our nation's 245th birthday. Yes. All right. And to my Spanish-speaking friends here, present here today, I want to say this. Y a mis amigos de habla Hispania aquí presente, hoy quiero decirle esto. Bienvenidos y gracias por su participación mientras nos reunimos y celebramos el cumpleaños de nuestra nación. How was that? I don't know. Okay. I tried. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Jamie. All right. Okay. So, now I did welcome those of you who were upstairs earlier for Abigail Adams' performance, so I won't try to be too repetitive now, but my name is Rich Padover. I'm the summer interpreter or tour guide here at Lawrence Heritage State Park, and I organize the old-fashioned 4th of July celebration every year, 15th annual, so kind of a milestone this year. And yes, okay, all right. So just a couple of some thank yous. I would like to thank Mrs. Abigail Adams. I believe she had to get back to Braintree now, but I'd like to thank her for her presence here today and for her help in representing her husband, the future Vice President and President John Adams, who of course was busy with the American Revolution in his efforts to secure independence for the colonies from Great Britain. So Abigail graciously represented her husband here this morning in addressing those of you who were here for that, so I thank her as well. And I also would like to thank LCAT, Daniel, and crew here, and Tom for videoing the event here today. So thank you to LCAT. I appreciate your help with this. And let's see here. Now, our just a couple of quick announcements before the flag raising. Our program of festivities is somewhat different this year, coming out of the recent pandemic. Today we had to adjust some things. Those of you who have been coming to this every year, you can see the difference, but we're just trying to keep everybody as safe as possible, again, you know, coming out of the pandemic now. So thank you all for your adaptability and flexibility with this year's program. So some quick thank yous. This program would not be possible today without the generous support and donations of area businesses and individuals and organizations. So what I'll do is just read out these names, and then when I'm done reading them out, we can all give them a round of applause. So thank you to the following for their generous support that made this event possible today. Bagel Boy on South Union Street in Lawrence, Butcher Boy Market in North Andover, Dairy Queen of South Lawrence, the Friends of Lawrence Heritage State Park, Market Basket, headquartered in Tewksbury, McDonald's Restaurant / MDC Management Company based in Chelmsford, the Service Center of Greater Lawrence Incorporated, and the T.A. Sullivan Insurance Agency, run by Mike Sullivan, the former mayor, who was a big supporter of the park here. So a round of applause for all of our sponsors. And I also want to thank some of the participants here today who are helping us with their time and their talents. Soloist Joseph Grieve, who I'll be calling up momentarily for the national anthem, and the International Veterans Care Services and their director and founder, Kelly Frazier, and Jamie Melendez, who helped secure them for me for their visit today. Yes. And Jamie, as some of you know, is the Director of Veteran Services here in the city of Lawrence. Now, for those of you who would like to assist in the flag raising, if you can please join us up here on the deck, please. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, of course, who very important historical figures in our nation's history and the struggle for independence. They both died on the same day, 50 years exactly to the day after Independence Day. So Jefferson and Adams both died on July 4th, 1826, just hours apart. And Adams did not know that Jefferson died before him. So Adams said something like to the effect, when on his deathbed, Jefferson survives, but not really, because back then it took a while for word to get around about things, you know. So, and you know, John Adams did say that July 4th would go down as a very important date in our nation's history, that it would be celebrated with great fanfare, right? You know, bonfires and fireworks and parades and all that. And that's, you know, my purpose here. What I've been trying to do for the past 15 years that I've been doing this is to try to, in a way, you know, recreate what John Adams wished for as, you know, we remember our nation's birthday every year. So obviously I can't provide fireworks, you know, I can't provide a bonfire, but I try to do what I can here for other activities on July 4th, okay? So, all right, so now Joseph Grieve will now sing the national anthem for us.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you.
So first of all, if I may have the volunteers come up here who would like to read a portion of the declaration, if you could please come up now. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get the reading started, and then we'll have these ladies and gentlemen come up to read a portion of the Declaration. All right. So, in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Okay, sir, would you like to take the next section here?
Okay.
All right, so he has refused.
Okay. Okay, I go off script for just a moment. This document means a lot to me. I'm an American, I'm a veteran, and I'm also a relative of somebody that the British killed on their way back from Lexington and Concord in Arlington in 1775, Jason Russell. The town, Arlington Town Historical Society building is named after him. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in legislature, a right unestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, and for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has resolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with mainly firmness in his invasion of their rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after dissolution to cause others to be elected, whereby legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all damages of invasion from without and convulsions within.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yay!
Tom?
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislators. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to the jurisdiction of foreign and our Constitution, and unknowledgeable by our laws, giving us the assent to their acts of pretend legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without consent, for depriving us many cases of benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses.
All right, that's good.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Yay!
Thank you.
For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. Okay, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the form of our governments. Is that enough?
All right, sure, that's good, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
you're
Darrell.
welcome.
Thanks, Dana. Okay. Okay, for suspending.
For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our town, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with our circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of our civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
Thank you.
He is excited.
He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages who known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitudes of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Thank you. Yes.
Jamie, if you want to read like the people that signed the declaration.
Okay.
You know?
I just want to emphasize also, and equally as so adamantly Mr. Russell said, this document means a lot to me as well. And signed by John Hancock, New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton, Massachusetts, John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, Elbridge Gerry, Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery, Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Wolcott, New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris, New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark. Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and George Ross. Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, and Thomas McCain. Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Parker, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson, Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton.
We'll let Frank do the rest. Thanks, John.
Down there? Right, bottom, right?
Okay, yes. So if you can pick up with North Carolina
All right.
and then finish it off.
All right. North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn. South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton. Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and George Walton. Thank you so much.
Okay, yes. Okay. All right. So thank you all for those who were the readers now. I appreciate your doing this. You know, it's part of tradition, of course, both at this event and when the Declaration was first in existence. And again, you know, news traveled very slowly back then. So some people did not find out, you know, about the Declaration for some time. So what they did to try to facilitate the news of the signing of the Declaration is they had different towns and cities, once they got a copy of it, they did like a public, like we're doing, like we do here every year, they did a public reading, like in the town square or the city square of the Declaration of Independence, and that's how they were able to get the word out back then with, you know, with the resources that they had available to them during this time. So, so it's sort of a tradition, you know, among many organizations and localities now as part of their 4th of July celebration, and something that I adopted for us when I first started doing this in 2006, that we do the public reading of the Declaration, just again to, you know, to acknowledge, you know, the hard work that those 55 delegates, you know, did in Philadelphia during that hot, sweltering summer, you know, trying to put together this document, which wasn't easy, Adams and Jefferson and others, in order to declare our freedom, our independence. And as you might imagine, there was a lot of bickering. It wasn't easy, a lot of give and take, you know, and it was hard to get agreement on a lot of things, but finally, you know, agreement was reached, and what we know as the Declaration of Independence today, and which we celebrate, you know, not only today necessarily, but we have to, you know, keep our freedom in mind, like all the time, right, all year, you know, the freedoms that that we do enjoy here in our country. So.
Thank God, veterans.
Yes. 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 And in recognition of our veterans as well. Yes. Thank you, Frank. Yes. Oh, sure, yes. My wife Lori would like to, some of you know her.
Just, I'm Richard's wife, Lori. Just quickly, what Thomas Jefferson did really so brilliantly in the Declaration was to outline what was happening. We didn't just start to dislike England. We weren't, as he pointed out, getting representation. They wanted us to follow all their rules. They wanted to collect our taxes, but we had nobody in Parliament. No, there was no seat in Parliament for the colonies. So he outlined, look, we're happy to be good citizens, but you're not good government. And the contract, therefore, is broken. So thank you. Sorry to butt in. Thank you.
Rich, are you going to be a politician? Smile.